Hello everybody and welcome back to the Not Applicable Formula 1 channel. This weekend we were in Austria for round 9 of the 2023 season and you guys rated it a 4 out of 5 stars and I completely agree. In fact, this weekend I think was nearing 5-star territory. The rain just before qualifying on Friday made finding grip tough, but the track dried just enough for the Ferraris to be close to Verstappen. The sprint on Saturday was possibly the most entertaining sprint we've had to date, with a very mixed grid, and then the weather again, meaning we actually saw strategy and pit stops during a sprint race, and then of course Sunday's race, which may forever be known as the Track Limits Grand Prix. 1,200 different instances that the stewards had to look at, and a whole lot of penalties too, but let's get into it. Here are my post-race driver ratings for the Austrian Grand Prix, from best to worst. Do I actually need to say anything else about Max? I'm bored of just heaping praise onto him at this point, but he absolutely deserves it. He made the whole weekend look pretty straightforward again, topping every single session and even getting every point available to him after Christian Horner asked very politely for Max Verstappen not to pit. So Max came into the pits and put together a glory lap on the soft tyres to finish the Grand Prix, just to remind everyone that he is leading the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship all by himself as well. We did see him have an actual battle this weekend with Sergio Perez in the sprint and Charles Leclerc in the race, but he overcame both of them fairly swiftly. Okay, I know that Lando Norris is a Red Bull Ring specialist, but this weekend was incredible from the McLaren driver. In both qualifying sessions, he was on the second row of the grid, and okay, the sprint race didn't go too well. He got caught up in the Perez-Verstappen battle, but come race day, he genuinely looked like he had a shout at a podium. Like, it was ridiculous. Ultimately, the Red Bulls and Ferraris were a little bit too quick. However, outperforming the Aston Martins and the Mercedes cars across the whole weekend is just incredibly impressive, with more upgrades coming their way for the Papaya team at next week's British Grand Prix as well. I'm just saying, watch this space. Looking at the numbers to your left, you'd be pretty right in thinking I'm mad for having Nico Hülkenberg this far up in my rankings, but it's all about the Saturday sprint for the German. 4th fastest in the sprint shootout qualifying meant that he was ahead of the Ferraris going into the sprint race, and then he switched tyres just in time, going from the intermediates to the mediums and overtaking the likes of Ocon and Russell, and then he grabbed 6th place, a huge 3 points for the Haas team. And it just shows that in the races, if we didn't have tyre degradation, the Haas car would actually be really good, although we didn't actually get to see the tyre degradation on Sunday because the Ferrari engine gave up 14 laps into the race. Charles Leclerc became the only driver to lead a lap since Miami other than Max Verstappen, which is something that we now have to celebrate. That's how dominant Max Verstappen has been, but Leclerc showed just why he's so highly rated at Ferrari, picking up his 2nd podium of the season, and he was probably even the slower of the 2 red cars. Like, he turned up just when it was required in qualifying to outqualify his teammate, had an off sprint, but you could tell he was focused on the race on Sunday, and when it came to Sunday, he absolutely smashed it. Alright, his lead didn't last very long, but what can you do when you've got Max Verstappen in your mirrors? Carlos Sainz came to life this weekend and for the majority looked to be the faster Ferrari, to the extent that I almost put him above Charles Leclerc in my rankings this week. The only problem was, even though Sainz picked up a podium in the sprint race, he still came away with less points this weekend than his teammate, who picked up a podium in the actual race. However, Sainz's race was incredibly compromised by the Ferrari strategy choice. A shocker there. Ferrari opted to bring both cars in under the virtual safety car, even though they were right next to each other, which meant Carlos Sainz lost a lot of time. That meant he lost even more time when he was battling with Norris and Hamilton and then later Perez. So when he retrospectively picked up a 10-second penalty and dropped 2 positions, I felt quite bad for him. Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin seemed to come back down to earth this weekend after an incredible start to the 2023 season that they've been having. Qualifying wasn't really anything to get excited about, so the Spaniard decided to go against the grain and start on the hard tyres, but then pitted under the virtual safety car anyway, which was weird, and then he just drove around all by himself for 71 laps, so a 5th place finish was probably the best he could have asked for. Pierre Gasly is in a really weird spot for Alpine at the moment. He managed a points finish again this weekend in Austria, even with a 10-second penalty being added to his race time, which meant that he did finish ahead of his teammate once again, and has finished in front of his teammate 5 out of 9 races. But if you ask most Formula 1 fans, they'll be saying that Ocon is having the better season, because his highs have just been so much higher. His teammate came away with more points this weekend, because he finished higher in the sprint race. But for Gasly this weekend, ignoring the track limit stuff, which he blamed on the dirty air behind Fernando Alonso, was a good weekend and a solid points performance in that Alpine car. I actually feel bad for Lance Stroll this weekend because he actually performed really well, and a ninth place finish isn't what he deserved on the Sunday. In the sprint, he actually managed to finish ahead of Fernando Alonso, even after a battle with his teammate at the end, and it looked like that battle would continue on in Sunday's race, but as Stroll was happily following along the other Aston Martin, the whole race was ruined behind the virtual safety car, because just as he came into the pits, the virtual safety car ended, meaning instead of rejoining behind his teammate, he now had to battle through Ocon, Albon, Magnussen, and Gasly, and he must have just been so confused. He went into the pits behind his teammate and came out behind literally everybody else. Alex put in another performance where he's getting absolutely everything out of that Williams car, only to have nothing to show for it. His 11th place finish is still very impressive though, as he once again managed to keep on paper faster cars behind him, with that Williams car seemingly getting more competitive, and as they upgrade continually throughout the season, the wall of Williams seems to be something that the entire midfield needs to be worried about. Many will argue that this is quite far down the rankings, considering Sergio finished on the podium in both the sprint race and the race itself, but considering the pace of that Red Bull car and the Austrian Red Bull ring, he should have finished ahead of Leclerc, and he should have finished there comfortably. It's now 4 Q3 sessions in a row that Sergio Perez has missed out on, which leads to a great drive from the Mexican as he smashed his way up the rankings, but he could have made it a lot easier for himself by just turning up in qualifying. Maybe this podium will be the turning point, because let's face it, since that crash in Monaco, he just really hasn't looked comfortable. He was the better of the two Mercedes this weekend, but that isn't saying much, as the W14 looked to take a little bit of a tumble on its climb towards the Red Bulls. Hamilton was certainly more comfortable with the Mercedes car and did very well on Friday, qualifying 5th. The Saturday completely fell apart thanks to an awkwardly placed Max Verstappen in the shootout. However, he did have a lap earlier which he messed up, and then come Sunday, it seemed like an understeering Mercedes car just could not stay on the track. Like, Hamilton picked up multiple penalties, dropping him actually behind his teammate George Russell. And although this may seem a touch low for Russell, considering both of his qualifyings were ruined by issues, like especially the shootout where he had the hydraulic issue that was completely out of his control, he had some nice moves and maximised his strategy to move up the order in both the sprint and the race, which makes me think that on a good day he maybe could have battled with Fernando Alonso had he started a little bit higher, but the W14 also looks really unhappy this weekend, so maybe not. At least he was one of the drivers who actually kept his car on the track. Can we take that as a win? Is that a win now? However, I'm not sure that we can talk about Esteban Ocon without addressing the 30 seconds of penalties in the room. Like, on one hand, I do feel for Esty because he clearly wasn't aware of the track limit infringements until after the race had already finished. I think Alex Albon said that he was getting reports of his track limit infringements 20 laps after they'd actually happened, but to break the track limits 10 times or over 10 times in 71 laps is actually impressive. And although actually on that, he must be absolutely sick of Alex Albon's Williams. He seems to be stuck behind him every single weekend at the moment. Logie Bear put in his best performance of the season so far for me this weekend, and considering he's a rookie, he wasn't caught out by the track limits anywhere near as much as some of the more experienced drivers on the grid. Like, don't get me wrong, his pace wasn't quite Alex Albon's level, and he still isn't quite able to put together a full lap in qualifying, but it's coming slowly, and when he gets the upgrades that Alex Albon has, maybe we'll see that gap close up just a little bit more. It was nice to see him have a weekend where he can come away with some positives though, because he's had a few tough weekends in a row recently. It's very difficult to gauge the Alfa Romeos this weekend. Like, the underlying pace of that car just feels so far off the rest of the midfield that Bottas couldn't really do much about it, and even when he tried, he got incredibly unlucky. He went for the slicks gamble in the sprint and had to pit before the sprint even started at the end of the formation lap, and then come Sunday, he damaged his front wing at turn 1 because he collided with the debris from Tsunoda's front wing, and both of those instances he couldn't really do much about it, and it led to a fairly anonymous weekend. Which is why I'm also putting Zhou Guanyu just behind his teammate, as he also had a slightly slower overall, but still incredibly anonymous weekend. Like, he was 14th on the second lap of Sunday's race, and still there at the end of it. So literally nothing happened. He did gain a couple of places because everyone else broke track limits and jumped up into 12th. But, and he actually confirmed on his Instagram that if only legitimate laps counted, he would have finished in 2nd. So a nice clean race from the Chinese driver. And that's about all you can say about it. The problem that Oscar Piastri has this weekend is that everyone will compare him to Lando Norris. However, given that he was running an old specification McLaren, those comparisons mean nothing. Like, he absolutely teared through the field when he put slick tyres on in the sprint. I think he was running 17th and got up to 11th, which was very fun to watch. But then come race day, he decided that he would bury his front wing into Kevin Magnussen in turn 3, whilst the Haas was battling with Stroll and Tsunoda, which meant any hope of doing well was completely ruined and a new front wing was required. On the surface, I thought Nick De Vries actually had an alright race this weekend, but then I looked into it a little bit deeper, and I was very wrong. He completely flopped in qualifying after taking way too much speed into turn 1 and bouncing into the curb, killing any chance of progressing. In the sprint, he struggled with the changing conditions, although so did the AlphaTauri, and didn't really achieve very much. And then in the race, he battled hard, but it was a little bit too hard as he pushed Kevin Magnussen off the track, which led to a penalty that was added to the numerous track limits penalties. Yeah, it just didn't go very well. I know I just said that Kevin was pushed off the track by De Vries, and that Nick was completely at fault for that, but if you look at how good Hulkenberg's weekend was, the pressure is really starting to build on Kevin. Don't get me wrong, he had an alright sprint Saturday, but his teammate scored points, and then come Sunday, he started from the pit lane, so we weren't expecting much, but he was still plagued by tyre degradation problems, which he described as the worst so far this season. Last but most certainly not least, Yuki Tsunoda, who undoubtedly had his worst weekend of the season by a long, long way. I think the only positive was that he still had better overall pace compared to his teammate. His teammate's Nick De Vries. The race on Sunday was just one calamity after another. He tried to sneak through at turn 1 past Stroll and then smashed into the inside of Ocon's Alpine, disintegrating his front wing. Then when he was back on the track, he managed to pick up a total of 20 seconds of added time to his race time, thanks to numerous track limits violations, which saw him finish last of the cars still in the race. My favourite moment of the weekend, though, was definitely the constant radio calls from all of the drivers just snitching on each other whenever the other driver went off the track. Like, Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton were definitely the best at this. Lewis was constantly on the radio, and McLaren actually asked Lando Norris to report every time Lewis went off, to which he literally couldn't because the Mercedes was just off the track so often. They made it up to each other after the event, but the constant bickering between the two was absolutely hilarious. That just about rounds it up though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who did I get wrong? Who did I get right? Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.